topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. It's my favorite day of the week because I get to be with you. And today, as we are talking about kindness story, I want to share one of our guests, Reid, is from Hawaii, and it's 4 a.m. for her. And I want to share her story. So we were in a summit, and Laura and Jocelyn were pitching their stories to me so that they could get on our show. And when I said that, yep, I'd love to have both of you. And then I told Laura that, this is a live show, and she was just so perky and said, yeah, it's all right. I'll get up and I want to be here. So it's about showing up. And today, that's our show going to be about, empowering your voice. So if you want to empower your voice, get a book, The Entrepreneur's Garden or the Expert to Influencer, because both of them will help you not only empower your voice, but also empower others' voice. So let's bring in our guests. Welcome, Laura. Welcome, Jocelyn.
Aloha.
Good morning. So great to be with you, Divya. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. So Jocelyn, share with us a moment from your childhood. And Laura, that'll be for you as well, where there was a positive moment or a positive person who left a remarkable impression on you.
Well, because we're going to be talking about speaking, I was thinking about one of my earliest memories. I grew up in Southern California. I live in Silicon Valley now, but I grew up in a Hollywood family, and the one that particularly loved live theater and live performance. And I remember being encouraged. It's funny, one of my best memories and one of my worst memories are the same thing. It's getting up on stage. I remember my best memory of getting up. It actually started as what I thought was going to be horrible. We were in a very large theater room, and my dad called me up on stage to sing, and I did not want to go. I wasn't prepared. I mean, I of course knew songs and I could do that, but I didn't know I was going to be doing it. And I was terrified. And I'm about 12 years old. And I got up and I was so nervous that I actually kind of blacked out and did not remember actually singing the song. And I came to in Spotlight to a standing ovation. And what I got out of, so I had this adrenaline rush of fear right beforehand. And then I had this rush of endorphins after from having done well. And unfortunately, I wasn't there to experience it, but because I literally came to, I just went into a spot of just being in the song and singing. But what I learned from that was that there's not a correlation between fear and doing well. And in fact, if anything, especially when you're on stage or performing, I learned that fear, it's actually an energy, and it's just like having a very powerful horse. If you have the reins, it's actually energy, because if I'm not nervous at all, I'm not going to be animated at all, and I'm going to be boring. So I've learned and then my career has taken me through versions. No. I learned that early on, and I'm so grateful I learned that and had that wonderful yet terrifying experience.
How about you, Laura?
I love that story, Jocelyn, going from fear to endorphins. What a feeling. For me, I grew up with a stutter and, speaking, I was just terrified of speaking, but I found so much solace in writing, even as a very young child. I think I was like 5 or 6 when I wrote my first little story. It was a little horror story. I think I always loved ghost stories since I was a little girl. And my mom, she loved to write, and she had this old typewriter, and really, she was the one, I'm realizing just really in this moment when you asked that question, that used to type out my stories. And I remember when the first time she typed it out, and I held it in my hand, and it felt like it had been published, even though she just pulled it from her typewriter. And, she really empowered me to be creative, to keep writing, because when I wrote, I found that I could express myself however I wanted. And it wasn't like in speaking where I had all these things in my head, but they would get stuck in my throat when I would try to speak them out. So I think, it was my mom who I actually just lost in the end of March.
Mm,
And so I really, when you ask that, I'm like, oh yeah, I gotta honor mom. And the typewriter I have behind me is, kind of reminds me of her as well. I think that maybe that's why I've always loved typewriters, and they
mm,
never crash. It's
mm.
kind of great.
Sorry for your loss. And
Oh, thank
yet at
you.
the same time, as you mentioned that, you're honoring her memory. So beautiful stories. So Jocelyn, you went from taking that energy of fear and transforming it into power. And
Mhm.
Laura, you took it in form of writing. So, and here's the thing, so many of us think that speaking is the only way to express your thoughts. So that showing up and empowering your voice can be through so many different mediums. It can be through writing. It can be through so many different phases. So that's very powerful. So Laura, tell us a little bit about your life journey as to what were you interested in and how did you get to be where you're at?
Mm. I love, what Jocelyn said too about being on stage, being like the worst moment and the best moment at the same time. And I think
Mhm.
eventually that happened for me. Even though I went through years of speech therapy to help me be a more fluid speaker, the feeling of just this shame and
Mm,
embarrassment and humiliation of being bullied for having a stutter, and just feeling like even into my adult years, that really stayed with me. And every once in a while, I would still get stuck on words. And that made me feel like I was living, this imposter kind of life. I wasn't really who I thought I was, because I was always trying to hide that part of myself. And it wasn't until it was about 15 years ago, and I was in a staff training. I was a teacher at the time. My son was just 2 years old. It was my first job back after being home with him for a bit. I really needed that job. And we were in a staff training, going around the room, introducing ourselves. I saw that word that I dreaded so much on any agenda at work, which was introductions, because I knew exactly what that meant. I would have to speak in front of people. And anytime I was put on the spot like that, for whatever reason, that it made it so much worse. Like I might be fine speaking in regular conversation, but in those kind of moments, I had a lot of anxiety around it. And as I got closer and closer for my turn to speak, I started having all these symptoms. I got really nauseous, I got dizzy, the severe back pain, and I didn't really know it then, but I was having a panic attack just from the thought of having to say my name and introduce myself. It was about 2 people before it was my turn, and I couldn't take it anymore. I got up and I ran into the bathroom, and I ended up going home sick, but really I went home ashamed. And I
mm,
remember telling myself that day, like looking in the mirror, just kind of hating myself and realizing something really has to change. It was exhausting, like to live in that kind of fear. It's true, it's energy, but I had made that choice to make it be this villain, this huge negative energy in my life. And then one day I'm walking by, walking downtown, walking by a little, outdoor mall, and there's a flyer for a storytelling competition. And it was just one of these serendipitous moments where I happened to notice it. And for whatever reason, I was just like, I have to do that. I have to enter that competition, even though it's like the scariest thing in the world for me. So I entered that storytelling competition, and I found this place of refuge that I never would have expected, which was on a stage in front of a microphone, sharing my story. And I won that competition, and that did boost my confidence. But really, I think the most impactful thing that happened from that experience was everyone that came up to me afterwards and said, "Oh, because of your vulnerability, you sharing your story, I'm inspired to share mine. I'm going to get up there and do the same thing." And because I'd gone through years of training myself to speak and tell stories, and a million techniques to overcome public speaking fear, I realized I kind of had this obligation then to help other people. And that's when I really started, leaning into the idea of helping people, coaching people, getting up on more stages and becoming a speaker.
Mm-hmm. And Jocelyn, you said something just kind of picking up back from Laura. Laura, you said that your fear compelled you, like, you had one of those moments, and then you face the fear. So we are hearing one strategy right here, that if you're facing the fear, face it. And then you found refuge on public stage and in public speaking. So which is very interesting. So coming back to you, Jocelyn, you've talked about fear. Tell us, like, what are the reasons behind the fear of public speaking?
Oh, that's a great question. And I love this because I've coached a lot of, executives, CEOs of large Fortune companies and founders of startups on taking the stage. And I ran PR for 2 years in Silicon Valley, where I also prep people for just one-on-one interviews, like with the Wall Street Journal or local television shows. And what happens? Fear comes up. And so I've not only experienced it personally and looked at overcoming it, but I've helped coach people through it. And I think so much of the fear is, of course, fear of failure. And I think as human beings, we straddle, these two sides of the coin. One is we want to fit in, and the other is we want to stand out. And so I think that a lot of the fear is we want to stand out in a good way. When you stick your neck out, take a stage, take a mic, take a typewriter or a pen, you are putting yourself in the arena to stand out. And the fear of failing comes up. And also I work with a lot of people as a coach where it's actually a fear of success. And that's even a little more interesting. But I think that fundamentally the fear comes from fear that something negative is going to happen. And I'm a certified neurosculptor, which is a fancy way of saying that I've studied a lot of neuroscience and how our brains work. And, when we get into fight or flight in our midbrain, or a freeze reaction, like personally, I learned that I was a freezer. I would just, freeze. But when you freeze or want to, fight or flight, what you are no longer in your prefrontal cortex, your higher level thinking, the one that has the positive outcome, is looking strategically, is thinking about, what you can add value to. And what I learned that I think would be great for your listeners to know is you can only feed one part of your brain or the other. It's a toggle. And so if you want to get out of fight or flight, you just need to engage your prefrontal cortex. Or if you want to get into your prefrontal cortex, you just need to calm down your fight or flight. It's like a teeter-totter. And once you learn that and you realize, oh, the sugar, the protein, everything that it's like a fuel pump, but you've only got one. And you can easily start switching to being out of fear by your breath. And I know Laura is really an expert at this as well, but by breathing, because when you're afraid, you're usually already in the future. Like 1 minute from now, after I open my mouth, maybe I'll make a mistake. An hour from now, when the speech is over, maybe people won't think I'm good. If you can pull yourself back into the present moment and go, well, right now I'm standing backstage, or, I'm in Zoom ready to go up. And and you picture what it is that you want to be doing. What's your purpose? I created the CLEAR method that I use for coaching, because the first C is clarify. And when you can get out of yourself and your own fear and start thinking, what experience do I want the people who are going to hear me have? And it's bringing in your own form of service, and it's bringing in your own mission and purpose into what you're there to deliver, and being clear on what outcome you want. And when you focus on that and get into the present moment, into your body with your breath, the fear of 1 minute from now, 1 day from now, 1 hour from now goes away. You toggle it down. And so you can really start playing with your brain almost in a gamifying way and have fun with fear.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, as you talked about the focus, and there is this myth about multitasking, and there are studies that have been shown. So, coming from a science background, I love knowing what new studies are coming out, and that our brains can focus only on one task at a time. So, which fits in directly with what you're saying, Jocelyn, is that use the one that will give you the momentum to keep going and switch from that flight to being in fear and working through it.
Mm-hmm.
So, Laura, as we have talked about different fears and all that, so there are a lot of different people out there, whether they're executives, whether you're in C-suite, because it doesn't matter whether you're an incoming Gen Z in the workforce, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you are a PTA mom, wherever you're at, fear of public speaking is number one or number two right there. I don't remember exactly on the list of the fears. So somebody is just terrified. So Laura, from your experience, what are the first few steps that they can take that can ease them into public speaking?
Well, I love the question, and to kind of expand on what Jocelyn was saying about the importance of being present and having that clarity, most people say that we need to break out of our comfort zone to grow. And what I say, especially when it comes to public speaking, is to get clear on what your comfort zone is. Because when we're in our comfort zones, we have that state of our relaxed brain. We can remember anything. We can recite poetry. We feel like we're our most authentic selves, and we can be ourselves. The minute that we say we're about to do this scary thing, and again, fear is so future-based. So, based in that sense of dread, because we don't really know what's going to happen, right? So we fear that so much. But when we tell ourselves we're breaking out of our comfort zone, I think it triggers that. And our brains, we get that nervous brain setting in where we can't remember our words. We blank out. All the nervous symptoms come up that we don't want when we're speaking. So one of the strategies that I use with my clients and with myself is to think about, okay, how am I in my comfort zone, and really picture what that is to you, whether it's being alone in nature in the woods or on your couch watching Netflix, or whatever it is for you, and then come up with maybe at least 3 words that embody that feeling for you. Maybe it's peaceful, right, and calm and relaxed, authentic, and set that as your intention before you're about to do the scary job interview or take the stage, whatever it is that is coming up for you that you're a little anxious about. So instead of really breaking out of your comfort zone, you're staying in it, but you're expanding it out to include that scary thing you're about to do. And for me, when I stopped telling myself I'm going to be, bold, kind of fake it till I make it, and just, force myself to break out of my comfort zone and get up on that stage, I said, you know what? I'm just going to be me. I'm going to be relaxed. I'm going to be calm going into this. It was really a game changer for me and for those that I work with.
Mm-hmm. That definitely makes sense, that having that calm, because when you're calm, you can see things clearly. And going back to what we have been talking about, that focus, rather than, even if you're focusing on future, rather than that you're going to fail, what if you succeed? So focusing on the positive, and what that does is knowing that. Also, one of the things that I've found, I do get the butterflies when I'm stepping on the stage, and then I'll just take a moment and think, like, you know what? Everybody puts on their pants just like me. Everybody's eating, everybody's brushing their teeth. So, you know what? We're human beings, and so what? If I make a mistake, I make a mistake. And Laura, really some good points are there. And Jocelyn, as you were talking about, coming into that moment, what could people do to lean into it? So, for example, how could they set the stage where they're like, okay, I need to have a plan B that if I make a mistake, what I'll do?
Mm.
What advice could you give?
Well, what I love about what you're talking about is you're touching on there's stress and there's eustress, EUSTRESS. And stress is the negative, and that's like where the fear is. Eustress is excitement. So there's a couple quick hacks I think of right away that I've used and that I've helped, in my coaching for other people to use, is when you feel that fear before you're going on an interview or before you're going on a stage, you might be feeling afraid, but if you just recognize that feeling and go, oh, I'm excited. When you tell yourself you're excited, you realize that you're pumped up. You're not actually, you're terrified. And you can actually, your mindset really dictates a lot of how you behave. If you're reinforcing to yourself that you're afraid, you're going to start doing more behaviors of somebody who's afraid. You're actually kind of talking yourself into being afraid. Whereas if you tell yourself, I'm excited, I'm so excited to be here, that really helps because you're telling your brain what that feeling is. And being excited, who wants to hear a bored speaker? You want to hear excited speakers because you want to hear people who are truly excited about what they're doing because they're inspiring and then you can have a transformational moment as a listener. So you want to be an excited speaker. So it's kind of that's how you can grab the reins of that horse I was talking about. And I think the other thing is, one thing that has really helped me and has helped others is when you get extremely self-conscious, and you're like, oh, am I wearing the right thing? Oh, I shouldn't have worn this outfit, or I should have done this, I should have done that. You're focused on yourself and you're putting a negative spotlight on yourself. And when you instead just start thinking of what experience do I want these people to have? What takeaway do I want them to have? What experience do I want to give them? Like maybe you're going to tell a story that's going to make them feel feelings or something. So you can keep it as simple or more orchestrated as you would like. But when you focus on the audience, even when you come on a stage, to look around and see the audience and connect with them and try to meet them where they are, when you're thinking about them, you're not thinking about yourself anymore. And I find that fear just kind of melts away.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Because what you're doing is you're shifting the fear from I to we.
Yes.
I to the value that you're providing, and going back to that why. As to why is it that you're on that stage?
Yes.
A lot of people are out there. Yes, speaking does take your message from one to many. Yes, it's getting your message out there. Yes, it's might be building your brand. But at the end of the day, most of the speakers, when they're setting foot on that stage, it is about providing value. It's about touching those people. It's about sharing your message. But even if you want to share your message, the key thing is why? And it is that desire to impact. It's that desire to connect. Mm-hmm. So I love that, Jocelyn. When you're saying that, make that connection, make that shift. So now we have talked about addressing the fear. The second part of public speaking is the content itself. And you could show up with great enthusiasm, great energy. Now the next thing that you got to do is the delivery, that you're providing value to people. So Laura, tell us, as somebody stepping onto the stage, usually they say, keep one idea, or so, as far as the content is concerned, tell us some few frameworks or some guidelines that can help, whether it's a professional or anything, depending. Of course, if you're an executive, then you are sitting down and focusing on your audience, like who the audience is, what you're presenting. Are you presenting the data, or are you in conference? It all depends. But are there any elements that are crucial to any good public speech?
Absolutely. And the first thing I'd share is what not to do, which is wing it. Sometimes we see really gifted, polished speakers, and it seems like they're speaking off the cuff. But, I think it was Mark Twain that said, it takes me weeks to prepare an impromptu speech. You have to put that work in. And the model that I really love to start with, though, to really clarify your message is called think, feel, do. So first, it's what do I want my audience to think about? And then what do I want them to feel? Do I want them to be inspired or motivated? And lastly, the do is that call to action. And the call to action could just be, a mindset change, what you want them to, take those thoughts to and turn it into some kind of action. But if I start with that, again, it's a reflection on the audience. I'm starting with them and not really me. And then if I can tie that to my key message that I love to share with the world, and I do think it's good to kind of boil it down to the essence of what this one singular message is, and then stick to that and tie in stories to that, right? And the more that we can share stories and anecdotes in our crafting our speech, of course, the more connected and engaged our audience is going to be. And then I like to just also not take ourselves so seriously. I think when we're crafting a speech and really looking at it, it feels like this huge task, and it's very serious, very important. But adding some humor in, thinking about the audience, what's going to be relatable human or relatable to that particular audience is really important. And so crafting that into to have some laugh moments in there, no matter how dark your topic might be, I think is really important.
Definitely, humor does that. And there's nothing better than laughing at yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because then what it does is it forms that connection between you and the audience. Because I don't know about you all, I've had very many funny moments where I've done all sorts of things that just like not up to par. But then when I look at them, they become such beautiful stories to be told. And usually, one of the things that I've found out for myself and for my clients is that when you share a story, that shows you're a human being and that you make mistakes just like anybody else. It forms that bond and that connection. So, Jocelyn, coming to you, as you have mentioned that you have coached people in the executive arena. So let's kind of go there. Like so many times what happens is in the executives or in the professional area, people are so stressed out because there's this data. They have to go through tons and tons of those slides, and those can be very, very boring. So how can they bring those elements in their meetings that not only they're influencing people, at the same time, they're holding the attention and getting the point across and getting the buy-in? I know that's a lot of asks here for you.
No, that's great. And it reminds me of a great lesson I learned through a forcing function. I was presenting a multi-million-dollar proposal to the executive team at a large Silicon Valley company. And I was given 5 minutes and 2 slides. That was a budget.
Mm-hmm.
And I had my whole deck that I had been shopping around to with the IT and all the marketing and sales, all the different groups, and it had all the data in there. And what I learned from that was how to synthesize down. So what I did was I said, and I followed a formula of what's the ask, what's the why, and then like a who and when kind of story, because it was a proposal and a project. But what I did was I realized that my putting all these other slides about the benefits, what our competitors were doing, and all that stuff was my wanting to overcompensate and justify why I was asking for what I was asking for.
Mm.
And so when you realize, and so what I did was I put 10 slides in the appendix. And I came in and I said, here's the problem statement, current view, and then here's what we could have. I painted the picture of the nirvana state, that we could have if we invested this time and money into doing this, and what the benefit was going to be to the customers and the company. and kept it very simple. And because my tendency was I want to give them all the data and all the data to prove why, this is a reasonable request. By having it all in the back, it actually made it such a more interesting conversation because it created a conversation instead of a monologue. Because guess what? I got 45 minutes at the executive team. They pushed other people out to the following week who were supposed to be behind me. And I went through all 10 slides in the appendix through the Q&A because an executive asked, well, what about this? Yeah, but the timing. Well, but what are our competitors doing? That was on slide 5. That was on slide 12. I got to get through all my content because they wanted to see it. And I realized the power of having a presentation be a conversation. You put up the premise and the why and something compelling, and then you engage through questions and answers. And nobody forgets your proposal or your project, and they become advocates because they're bought in, because they were asking you why. You weren't pushing data up in front of them where they're sitting there thinking, I need to get cat food. I got to get to the gym. They are actually thinking, well, why this? Why that? How would this work? And you're answering them. So the power of having short slides and a large appendix, a short ask and a benefit, a problem statement, and then having the rest be in the back. One of two things is going to happen. You're either going to have a much shorter meeting or you're going to have a longer meeting with very rich content. Either way, you're still going to be memorable. So it's a very powerful approach that I found.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And in the arena of the corporate world, what would you say are 2 to 3 elements that are necessary when you're not present? Like the example you gave was about a proposal, but let's say they are starting out with an initiative and they need to get a buy-in from the stakeholders. So Jocelyn, go ahead.
One thing I did that I like to do too, and I've helped other people in putting together presentations, you've got different types of people in the audience. So again, back to the audience, you've got your data-driven people, you've got your big picture people. So this is the kind of formula I used. I would do 4 slides that are key and very clear. There's a who slide, there's a what slide, there's a why slide, and there's a when slide. And literally when I would pre-shop any presentation to get some feedback, depending on who I was showing it to, I would give it, like our CFO was more of a big picture why person. So I started with the why with him and then the what, and when I would show it to other people who were very in the weeds about the schedule and the cost and the detail, I would say that, here's the outcome. And I'm not talking about a proposal right now. I'm talking about like, okay, here's a project status. Here's the status. Here's where we are. They want to know, are we on schedule, on budget? So I get to that more quickly. When I'm in a general meeting with, like, let's say you're presenting to a lot of people, you have to put it in the right order of flow. But I found that by breaking those slides in, you get everybody's attention because you're giving everybody something. Instead of trying to appeal to everybody on every slide, you're not going to keep their attention. But if I'm a data person, I'm going to see that data and gravitate to your graph. If I'm the why big picture person, I'm going to gravitate to that benefit. And so if you can give everybody something to be engaged, again, those are memorable moments, and you're going to get all the different personality types and brain types engaged and bought into your presentation when you give them, make their slide, and it'll really sing to them.
Definitely. And those principles, as you talked about, and adding that where, those principles are uniformly spread across, like whether you're talking, like, creating that report, whether it's technical writing, or whether you're doing that public speaking, or creating a point across, or doing an influence, or writing a book. And those are very powerful questions because when they're used, you're thinking about the audience. And it goes back to what we were talking in the beginning of our conversation, shifting the focus from you to them and the value that you're delivering.
Absolutely. Yes.
So Laura, now if we just talk about in the realm of as a universal public speaking, what would you say would be the questions? And it would be dependent on the audience. but what would be the questions, or are there any other frameworks that our audience could take and implement them today?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the beginning and the ending of your presentation, or your conversation really that you're having with people, is the most important. It's kind of like, you're the pilot of a plane, and the takeoff and the landing, that's what people really care about. When you're up in the air, you can take a take a little nap, have some peanuts, whatever. But that the beginning and the end is so important. And I think a powerful way to begin a presentation can be with a question. I would say what not to do is start your presentation with what everyone expects. Because again, you want to capture everyone's attention right from the start, really hook and lure the audience into alert them that you're going to be sharing something really interesting with them. So a word that I love to start with, and that I share with my clients, is if you can think of the word imagine, like just have the word imagine, and then expand that out to include, a theme of what your talk and your topic is going to be as your question. That could be a really powerful way to begin. So imagine if, one day, and then whatever it is, one day you're on stage and you're not feeling fear, only excitement, or whatever it is. We can't help it. Our brains can't help but start to visualize and answer that question in our minds. So you kind of have them hooked in. Another way that I would love to begin, that's not quite a question, but it would be with a framework that I love of a story. And they're really simple frameworks out there. One that I have in my book is, just follows a very simple story arc, but it's really just a fill in the blank. And what I love too about storytelling is we think it has to be something that really creative, and we have to be writers or very creative people to tell good stories. But really, it's very scientific, and anyone can be a great storyteller. I've given a presentation to some data scientists who gave a lot of talks and just wanted to be less boring. That was their words. And I taught them this simple framework. They all worked on it and came back and shared. And I'll never forget this one scientist and his framework. He filled in the framework, and it started out: once there was an algorithm. And the algorithm became the hero of his story. And we're all so enthralled. Like, I couldn't wait to find out what happened to this algorithm. But again, it was just following this really simple framework. So I do think it's, there are methods and things out there. I have in my book all of the models and frameworks that I love. But if you can find a storytelling one that really works for you and come up with some great questions, you're going to have a much more engaged audience.
Mm-hmm. So, Laura, you did mention about the ending. What are a couple of things that, and you've also mentioned call to action before. What are a couple of things that people can end with?
Yeah, this is one of my pet peeves with speakers. Sometimes we tend to throw away the ending, and just like, well, that's all I got. Thanks, and we've given this really powerful speech, but then that's what they're left with. So the ending, you really want to wrap it up, maybe tie to the beginning, re-ask that question, and maybe they're going to answer it in a different way, but leave them with something really strong there at the end. Another mistake that a lot of speakers make is we end with the questions. So when you end with the questions, you're kind of giving away some of your power with that. And I think questions can be really important, but stay in control as the speaker. And you could say, I'm going to spend, 4 or 5 minutes taking questions right now. And then I want to share with you one last final message, or, make sure it's like back to you, so you can end with that call to action or that powerful statement to remind them, so it's top of mind as they're leaving, the impact of what you shared.
Powerful. So where can our audience find you and connect with you?
You can go to my website, which is thespeechslayer.com. And there you can find my book. It's also on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com. But if you go to my website, I also offer just a free talk story call. And I'd love to just share some of my tips with any of your listeners that have an upcoming speech. I'm happy to just share with them in that 20 minutes some things that hopefully they can walk away with and will help them.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And Jocelyn, how can people connect with you?
So you can go to jocelynking.com, Jocelyn, Jocelyn, king.com. And you can sign up for a couple of things. I really love sharing the simple steps to get unstuck and live a life you love. And I also have a background in cybersecurity, so I sprinkle in some life safety tips, because if you don't feel safe in what you're doing, you aren't going to be building, your dream life. So I do both at my site and love to have people sign up, and I could share. I love to put out free tips and free and clear tips on my clear method, and I'd love to have people engage with me and help them in any way I can.
Well, fantastic. So as we bring the show to a close, do you all have any last tips that you'd like to share with our audience?
Go ahead, Laura.
Okay, can go. My biggest tip is to know and realize that really what you fear will ultimately set you free. When you can really look at your fears and what they are, they can help direct you into what you need to work on in your life, and what stages might await you, and not let fear really get in your way, but see it as a friend that's going to be holding your hand, leading you to where you need to be, to not only change your own life, but change the lives of others as well.
That's great.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jocelyn.
I'm going to actually focus on having your listeners think about not just coming up with what they want in their life or what they want in their talk or what they want in their business, but actually envisioning it. One of the most powerful things I learned in studying our brains is that what you see with your eyes and what you imagine in the movie screen in your head, there's no differentiation. And so that's why you can terrify yourself with a thought, just almost maybe even more so than you might be scared of something that's actually happening in real life. And the power of that is that when you envision your own success, if you're doing something in your business or in your life, or you have any kind of a goal, maybe you get clear on what you want. You clarify what you want. You list out the actions you should do. But before you start doing something, envision your own success. That's why I made the E in clear, envision before you execute. Because when you envision your own success in your talk, in your business conversation, in your personal life, in whatever you want, when you envision your own success, your brain then works 24/7 to help make sure that happens. So put your brain to work for you. Let your brain do the multitasking in the background for you, so you can live the life you love and have every success in every area of your life that you want. So envision your own success, be your best advocate, and put your brain to work for you.
Mm-hmm. Very powerful. Well, thank you, Jocelyn, and thank you, Laura, for joining us. You've shared some very powerful tips that our listeners and audience can take it with them, implement in their lives.
Thank you so much. This has been so fun. I'm going to be going back to bed, but with lots of good feelings of this. So thank you so much.
Yeah. And Divya, thank you. You have such a wonderful show and such great listeners. I love engaging with everybody. And aloha to Laura.
Thank you. Thank you. Aloha.
Aloha,
everyone.
Laura. And
Thank you.
thank you again, both of you. And thank you, wonderful family. Because without you, the show would not be possible. Reach out to us. Let us know how can we serve you, how we can support you. Because the show is for you. It is so that you can live the life you want. It is so that you can have the joy and freedom and love that you deserve. And thank you, Juan, for making the show technically possible. And we'll see you next time. Be well and take care.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who've experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.